Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to you lovely folks joining me here nice and early over at Marvel Snap Zone. Welcome on in to another installment of Infinite Decks of the Week, the weekly series where I walk you through some of the more innovative and unique decks that are currently making their way into the Infinite rank each and every week. This time round, we've had a balance patch since we last had a episode of this series, and things have flourished quite a bit. There's been a little more space to play. People have been exploring unique archetypes, but a lot of those players were already in the Infinite rank. So this week, we're going to take some time to focus on decks we know have made the climb this time round, and take a look at exactly what people are exploring and succeeding with this week. If you do enjoy this series, you've got to be sure to let me know. Leave a comment down below about how you feel about the current Marvel Snap metagame. Make sure you're subscribed here to Marvel Snap Zone over on YouTube, and leave a like on the video if you don't mind while you're down there. Let's take a look at some of the more unique decks making Infinite this week. Serra Control appears to have regained a top tier status. Before the patch, the Darkhawk variant of this deck was easily the most popular one going round, in large part in thanks to Thanos feeding Darkhawk's power overall, with the former now losing a ton of his popularity in the first week so far since the patch. Seeing a more old school Serra Control deck seems to make a lot of sense. I don't know if no copy of Zabu is intentional or whether or not Vanilla Rogan doesn't own the card, but it does feel somewhat fine, honestly, to not be included in the deck, given that we don't have Darkhawk or Rockslide included alongside the usual 4-cost cards. Instead of Zabu, Angela is slotted in as a 2-cost card here. It was a former staple in this archetype before, because Serra Control is one of the few archetypes that can still get good value out of it, even if you don't play it on turn 2. The other difference between the common builds here is Magneto. Usually, 6-cost cards are a big no-no in Serra archetypes, since most players will just retreat if they don't find the namesake card by turn number 5. With Magneto as a potential turn 6, one could definitely imagine a more proactive approach, playing Shang-Chi or Enchantress to cancel out something on turn 5 before finishing the game with a big stat stick on the final turn. Most players have predicted that Serra Control is a strong deck after the patch, but the way it's built might very well surprise us down the line. Other ways to build this deck have already emerged, with the Toxic variant reaching Infinite as well since the patch went live. The Magic Infinite deck finds itself charging into Infinite this week. I've seen a number of names for this archetype in addition to several different ways to build it, but the core idea is to work around Moon Girl, She-Hulk, and the Infinite to create an incredible final turn. As direct support, we have cards like Quinjet and Magic to help us with our energy management, and America Chavez to add extra consistency to this deck. Sunspot only feels natural since we're going to be passing a turn at some point to set up our She-Hulk plus Infinite finisher. The rest of this build is very flexible overall, and there are takes on this archetype where the early part of the game is built around lane disruption with cards like Viper and Green Goblin, and such other builds like the one you see here with many different 1-cost cards presented. I do like the idea of having all these cheap cards, as it should make it easier to manage our hand with Moon Girl. Before the patch, this deck was having quite a hard time existing, because Leech was really cancelling out She-Hulk. Sure, it would make the Infinite playable without its normal condition, but the deck is really built around the idea of passing a turn anyway, so it wasn't a massive help compared to losing the ability to play She-Hulk. With less of the Green Man on the horizon right now, the deck has been shared by several players, and could be on the comeback trail. Discard decks are rejoicing as Leech lost a lot of popularity all around. Completely ridiculed in February when it was supposed to be the synergy on top thanks to MODOK, discard decks probably suffered the most from Leech's rise to popularity. With the patch hitting Thanos Lockjaw, discard gained a lot of room to get its synergies going, with Morbius, Dracula, and even a Hela version of this deck all feeling much better lately. It's been hard to have a feel of what the best lists are looking like right now, considering a lot of weird experiments were done around discard during the last month. But for what it's worth, I think we might be going back to the Lockjaw based list for Dracula discard right now as we hold our resources in hand and plan out some highly synergistic turns. As for the Hela deck, this deck went through a lot of different phases without ever really finding its footing during the previous metagame. game. MODOK and Hela are the core of the deck, but the way you surround them and try and combo off is still very up in the air. Lockjaw, Invisible Woman, and even ways to try and play both at the same time, with Magic on turn 5 into Wave plus Psylocke on turn 6, enable Hela plus MODOK on turn 7, and that is a prospect being tested as we speak. As usual, we're going to need to see where this goes, but it's nice to see that this card wasn't abandoned despite its huge lack of success last season. Last but not least, Aero is still finding some success alongside Wave and Sandman in the ramp archetypes. Aero definitely feels like the biggest change of the patch, right behind Quinjet, and the card has divided the community when the announcement was made. With its new effect, Aero sort of lost its staple status in the metagame, but still, it has some very good allies to be paired with, just not in every single deck. In Kyle's deck here, we can see both of these allies, Wave and Sandman. Both cards slow the game down immensely by turning it into a 1 card per turn type of deal, which makes Aero into her old self again. Other decks with Wave have resurfaced as well, but Electro Ramp feels like a great home for Aero because you can also find Odin in case you want to reactivate her as well. Similarly to Serra Control, Electro Ramp isn't really a surprise to see after the patch, although this precise take, including Shang-Chi, is a little bit more teched out than otherwise synergistic and traditional builds. Shuri Zero remains a difficult opponent, but we've seen many more synergistic decks come back, with Thanos Lockjaw being nerfed, and those decks can be very annoyed by a copy of Sandman. The future might be bright for this archetype, depending on what decks we start to see emerging in the next week. While Shuri Zero might still be a dominant force, there is definitely a bigger sense of diversity, I guess, with what can be played so far up to this point. In that regard, it does feel like the balance patch was a step in the right direction. In my opinion, Shuri Zero, still standing strong, is a bit of a gamble on the behalf of Second Dinner. I think they might believe there are enough tools in the game to keep the deck in check if it's the sole problem to solve. That's a question that we're really going to get an answer to as the end of the season is kind of drawing to a close, and there are tournaments happening all over. Next week should be a really good testimony as the player base will hopefully have had enough time to figure out what they want to do to attack that deck. Until then, I wish you all a speedy climb up on the Marvel Snap ladder if you're still doing it. May the Cube Gods be with you. If you want to talk about anything about this series, you're more than welcome to reach out to us in the community Discord server. We're talking Marvel Snap 24 hours a day with thousands of other players. There's a link for that in the description box down below. Or you can come and find us over on Twitter if you like, at Marvel Snap Zone. You can find me at Howling Minds or Den at DenCCG. But until next time, I have been Howling Minds. You have been amazing. And this has been Marvel Snap Zone. Take care of yourself. Have a good one.